And with that, welcome back to our 3 o'clock session. I am really thrilled to welcome a group that I had the privilege of interacting in this semester, in the winter semester at NYU. We will dive into how academia had to adapt. Just imagine the massive transition from in-person learning to now digital learning. And I wanted to spotlight this group because there are a couple of things. Number one, the program that is being for the first year now taught at NYU, which is the Human Capital Analytics and Technology. It's first of its kind that it's completely online, and it allows us HR practitioners to get exposed to this new digital reality and using analytics to create better decisions. But more importantly, it is giving an opportunity to HR practitioners to learn how to think differently about the workplace, to get exposed to the design thinking principles, to digitization, to the value of technology and in the flow learning, all of these things that you've heard so far to create a better experience for the workplace. And I think the students, both through the content they've learned as well as through their experience in learning, have gained valuable insights and will be the generation that will change how HR works going forward. And I'm really thrilled to introduce the class as well as introduce Tavis, who put in place this program and who is the academic director of the NYU School of Professional Studies, that is the champion behind the program and creating a better HR experience for everybody. With that, Anna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Stella. It's an honor to join this conversation and present the academic point of view. As everything else, academia has been disrupted in many ways, and in many other ways, it just accelerated some of the trends that have been already at work. Oh, I can see my screen is not, let me just change this. I know it could be a little distracting. We're just going to see my living room. So the thought behind this panel was to give the students in our program the voice to talk and share their experience of learning online, as well as learning about digital workplace and getting ready for the new post-COVID environment. They didn't know it when they were starting the program, but here we are. There's a big conversation that's happening now in higher education about the future of higher ed. Everything we've heard about learning, lifelong learning, learning in the flow of work, and everything that's companies are doing to continue reskilling, new skilling, upskilling, trans-skilling their workers to ensure employability, continuity, and viability of business. And in this context, the big question obviously comes up about the role of academia. Is academia too old-fashioned, too big, and not agile to respond to the market, et cetera? And we believe that it really takes all of us to get us to where we need to be in terms of skills, sustainability, and continuing learning of the workforce. Students that come to us, to the School of Professional Studies, are mostly career changes. Learning in the flow of work is very good if you're incrementally increasing the skill set or renewing the skill set that's already in place. If you want to do a 180, if you want to do a 90-degree change in your career, you probably need a much more significant infusion of knowledge and reconfigure your social network to be able to function in a very different work environment from where you're coming from. Or you want to make a significant career leap in where you are. A lot of students come to us, they're in a very starting positions in their companies, and they want to accelerate their promotions, their growth. And that's where academia, I think, plays a very unique role, allowing in an accelerated technologically empowered way, the way we want to be, to make those significant leaps in the career development of our students. Again, I believe that it will take all of us to achieve the goals that we're all trying to achieve. And on this note, I just want to go to the students here who are all with their NYU backgrounds, which is also significant. This particular group has been learning online for the entirety of the year, with the exception of the immersion class that we developed to build the team, to build the cohesion, when students flew in from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, to actually personally connect. And then from that point on, for the rest of their academic year, they are online. And I want to ask the first question of this group: what is the experience of an online student? How is it different from, you know, your traditional academic experience on campus? And what are the pros and cons that you personally experience in this new learning environment? And I will start with Tom, and I will go to the rest of the group.
So it's nice to be here. Thank you. It's a privilege to be able to share our experience and share my experience. As somebody who has a little more experience in the group, I'm experienced at virtual facilitation and presenters, and as a learner, and so this experience has been seamless for me. But having access to industry leaders from wherever they are in the world, one of our professors is currently sitting in Argentina, is an opportunity that's unique to online delivery. Each of the classes presents different challenges because you have to get used to the professor, and the professor have different styles. Some are more interactive, some are more engaging, but they all are committed to providing that great experience for us online. The only con for me is that I wish I had more time with my classmates. There's just missed opportunities to bounce ideas during casual conversations and to learn socially from each other in a more engaged environment.
Thank you, Tom. Michael.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, you know, I think one of the obvious benefits for me is I'm currently sitting in Texas because that's where I live, and I go to New York University, right? So that's tells you about the transformational nature of higher education, to be able to access so many different people. I think there are other inherent benefits too when you think about kind of our class. This session is recorded. All of our classes are recorded. You can go back and watch if you ever need to drill down into different things that you may have missed. And I think it's just been a really effective learning environment, and we've all really benefited from the experience.
Thank you so much. Himani.
Thank you, Anna. So I'm a working mother, and one of the biggest reason and the most encouragement reason was that it's online available, so I can see my daughter and also study while I'm seeing my daughter. So this class has given me so much, and I've learned so much online. The travel time is reduced with having classes online, so I can give that travel time to my family. And also with all the options available of breakout rooms, poll systems, surveys, I think online training has been very, very successful for me personally. One of the only cons is when we do these group presentations, or when we have to give group assignments, it's a little bit hard to kind of connect because everyone is working, everyone is busy in their schedules. However, we do have technology in place to come over that as well. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Leti.
Thank you, Anna. I think that for me, the biggest advantage as well is the increasing flexibility. For instance, last year I traveled around 50% of the time for work, and taking the program online allowed me to continue my education despite the fact that I was in a different city every week. And I agree, I think that probably the only disadvantage is that there are limited opportunities to interact face-to-face with professor and with other students. But when we get to see each other in person, it feels like we have spent a lot of time together.
Thank you very much. Paula?
Yeah, so my experience as an online student has been great. Pros are definitely having the opportunity to study online, meaning that I get to cut out the commute to and from Manhattan. I also appreciate that you have the option of having like a synchronous or asynchronous course modality. Of course, this program here is completely synchronous, but I know with other online programs, you do have the opportunity to have an asynchronous class. Some of the cons I would say would definitely be like maybe balancing the course load with like your personal responsibilities. Some of the courses do have heavier content, so it's just about you know, knowing how to allocate your time essentially. And yeah.
Okay, great, great. It looks like everyone is more, there are more pros than cons for most of them. And in fact, I talked to some of you instructors today who for the first time were teaching online because of the change of modality due to COVID. And they were initially very reluctant to do so, but now they're finding a lot of things much more effective in the online learning environment than what they were doing before. Lots of distractions when you are in a person-to-person situation, they found. So another question I have related to the classes that you've taken, what your most favorite was digital workplace design. I know you've learned a lot in that class. And so what have you discovered in that class about digital workplace when you are in the digital classroom that was a big insight and an aha moment for you? We'll start with Leti.
Thank you, Anna. I think that my biggest aha moment was when I understood how important is empathy for workplace design, like really understand your user and how that user interacts with technology. For instance, actually in that class, Paula and I built a chatbot to support just-in-time training. And a key part of the process was like deeply understanding the user journey and the moments of truth, as Stella says. I discovered that finally you can invest a couple of days of work in building a chatbot, but what really matters is spending enough time in understanding your user, like how empathy is crucial because it helps us set aside our own assumptions and gain insights into the user and their needs.
Thank you so much. Paula, what about you?
So for me, my aha moment was definitely learning about human-centered design. I think the principles behind it are very fundamental. It plays a tremendous part in just learning about humans, their interactions, ways to engagement, and just ultimately how to use all of that and, you know, fuse it together and like propel the workforce forward.
Great. Himani?
So for me, it was the learning experience, how visually we can learn, and putting in all pictures throughout the presentation gave me a lasting memory for those learnings, and also how we can analyze data and put it into graphics. And there's a better way of communicating the whole story with data and graphics. That was a big learning story for me.
Thank you. Michael?
I think one of the key things we learned from Stoll was that individuals have different core beliefs, values, attitudes towards work. And that's true across the board, but I think it becomes even heightened in a distributed environment because we're not flexing to our environments all day, every day, right? And we're not interacting with others constantly. So it becomes even more pronounced. And I think being able to really tailor those experiences, as we heard Donna talk about earlier, to be able to adjust to different needs, you know, an employee who really values autonomy is going to react differently than an employee who really values kind of consistent communication and reinforcement. So tailoring that experience is incredibly important.
And Tom?
Like Leti and Paula, for me, it was developing personas and journey mapping in support of human-centered design. Excuse me. Developing a persona and journey map for a recruiter helped me to design and develop an AI chatbot that I called REPA, or Recruiter Personal Assistant. It was designed to improve recruiter alignment with the organization's strategic priorities and provide a better holistic experience for the recruiters by being aligned to their personal and professional needs, experiences, behaviors, and goals. And I wouldn't have had that type of insight without developing, understanding the persona, and then mapping out their existing journey, and then what an optimal journey would look like. So it led me to better technology solutions.
Excellent. So as we are going to be moving to the completely online environment, or at least largely online classroom, even if we go back to the face-to-face, there will be significant elements, augmentations to traditional teaching with technology and online communication interaction. So what do you believe are the skills that will be needed to be effective in this type of a new environment post-COVID? In the classroom and in the workplace. We'll start with Leti.
Thank you, Anna. I have been thinking about this a lot, and I think that emotional intelligence and learnability are going to be more and more important in time. Emotional intelligence helps you increase your resiliency, motivation, your empathy, your stress management, your communication, basically everything. So that's going to be more important because the world is going to be changing at a faster pace. And learnability, which I define as the desire to learn continuously and the ability to learn continuously, I think it's important because that enables us to learn, but also to unlearn and relearn throughout our lives.
Why do you think it's more important than, becomes so much more important than in the face-to-face situation?
I think that when you are learning online, you have to be more like an independent learner. You have to manage your time. You have to manage your levels of energy. You have to create like new rituals. And that's why learning how to learn, it's so important, especially for a digital environment.
Right. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I think as I think about a virtual and distributed environment, often the work doesn't change, but how we communicate changes. And a lot of times it's about those soft skills, right? So, you know, Franny mentioned earlier that the screen is an additional barrier to communication. I think on the flip side, it can also, there are so many digital forms of communication that can be even more effective than in-person communication sometimes. And while you can't just pop your head over the cubicle, thinking really critically about what the right mode of communication is for a particular message. If we take that from kind of the back of our minds and move it to the front and really try to deliver effective messages in the right form and gather feedback on how that message is being received, I think that's going to be incredibly important as we're kind of not interacting with each other on a more consistent basis.
Okay. And have you changed anything in the way you communicate because of this insight?
It's a good question. I think, you know, I wasn't a Slack user previously. I don't use it for work, and we've recently started using Slack for one of our classes, and I find it to be really effective to be able to kind of keep the dialogue going. And I think there are so many different mediums out there that, if used most effectively for the right messages, will heighten our communication, even though we're more apart.
Okay. Paula, what about you? What are the skills that you picked up from this experience?
So for me, it was definitely having a greater sense of creativity. I think it's not only going to be important for, you know, creating course content or, you know, giving a presentation, but it's also going to be about finding ways to really engage your audience, because, you know, now it's virtual. Not everyone is used to the virtual environment like you and I. So how are we going to engage those people and make sure that the message is really also coming across to them?
Okay, great. Tom?
For me, it's leadership skills to maintain culture and engagement. Today's most progressive and successful organizations depend on a strong culture and commitment from their staff. Don't lose sight of culture for your virtual teams.
Well, that's interesting. Can you comment on that? How do you keep sight of the culture with the virtual environment being kind of your major context?
Sometimes it's as simple as when you go into the office and you see somebody, you tend to say good morning. But when you go into when you IM somebody, you tend to lose that little bit of politeness. As my organization transitioned to be fully online, there was a lot of conversation around maintaining management's ability to manage their people, and there was very little conversation around culture and engagement. And they immediately started to see a dip in terms of productivity, which they expected, but it was more than what they expected. And as they reached out to different people and saying, hey, what are you doing to stay engaged with one another? And people were talking about having a virtual happy hour, and they were talking about connecting with stuff other than work stuff, which is exactly what they do in the day-to-day at work anyway. They saw that teams started becoming closer online. So it's a matter of recreating virtually the culture and the interactions that you have in face-to-face interactions.
That's a great insight. Himani, what about you?
Sure. So just adding to what everyone said, I'll talk about my own personal experience. I work as a project manager, and I've been doing my daily stand-ups in person before COVID situation. I used to meet leaders just on a quick 5 minutes meeting, which was not really a formal meeting, to update them about the status and everything. Now that we are all virtual, and I have still my daily stand-ups, and there is less attendance initially. So one of the skills that I had to build on was really engagement and communication skill. Of course, leadership skill is the most important, I feel, to keep everyone motivated. So one word that is very important here is motivation level. That drops down when we are going virtual, and the more we are going virtual. And then second important skill that I had to work on was the innovative skill of thinking how I can engage more people, how I can get better responses, how I can reduce the time of skill communication gap. So I try to keep my meetings less than 15 minutes for the stand-ups, and other meetings less than 30 minutes, just to make sure everyone is engaged. And talking about my student experience, I feel professors have done a great job keeping everyone engaged using the polls, surveys, or breakout rooms. And of course, one important skill was how you can lead the class. That really drove my engagement level in the class. So.
Very good. Now, you are fairly experienced online learners. That's what you chose for yourself. I personally see that there is a lot more resistance and a lot more anxiety in the social context we're in right now with COVID about the future of education online, right? I think people are more accepting of working from home, but there are a lot more unknowns. And it goes all the way from kindergarten on and even preschool. There are lots of questions about, how will education work out if we were, let's say, in this type of environment, or have to be sheltering in place for much longer. A lot more unknowns than in the workplace. So given your experience as online learners, what would you recommend to those who are considering whether to take a program online or sign up for more traditional class environment, which is still unknown to us? And NYU is not telling us exactly when we're going to go back, right? So what will be your recommendations for the new learners online that will help them get started and get some of that anxiety out of the way? I will start with Paula.
Yeah, thank you. So great question. I would definitely start by really learning what your learning style is online. I would also conduct what I like to call a technology or software audit on yourself. Like, how familiar are you with the digital technologies that are out there? So things like Zoom, WebEx, and different tools like that. Are you able to navigate those things? Because that's what we're using when we go virtual. Also, something that I believe is important is just really understanding, like, again, your learning style, and are you self-directed? Are you able to take a syllabus and break it down and know, like, how you're going to study and how you're going to break down the material throughout the course. And if you're, you know, not that type of person, how do you learn the behaviors to become better at it?
Thank you. Leti, what about you?
I agree with Paula, and I will add that learning how to manage your time is super important to be an effective online learning, and also like building specific rituals and routines that help you be productive and be focused. For instance, preparing your workspace or making a to-do list with all your assignments, reflecting on your learning priorities and goals at the beginning of the day or the beginning of the week. And I think that this is super important for the online learner, because finally, like, we are what we repeatedly do.
Very good. Michael?
Yeah, I think what I'd recommend to anyone new to online learning is the heightened importance of coming prepared. You know, as we think about, even with work and with class as well, in this remote environment, the opportunities that you actually have FaceTime and interaction are much more limited. And being able to really take advantage of those and not squander opportunities to have really fruitful conversations is going to be really important in making sure that we're having real dialogue in the moments that matter. An analogy that I think helps me is I'm in the health and wellness industry, and I hate stretching before I exercise. And one of our health coaches told me to stop thinking about stretching as something that I have to do before I exercise, and instead think of it as something that's just part of my exercise. It's how my exercise starts. And I think about my classes and my meetings for work that are online in much the same way, that 5, 10, 15 minutes before, whatever I need in order to come really prepared, is just part of the meeting for me. And I think that's been really helpful in getting the most out of the online time.
So what I'm hearing, self-management is just as important as coming into a very well curated environment with all of the pedagogy available, et cetera. It's a two-way process. And there's as much a responsibility on the learner as it is on the designer of that educational experience. Tom, I didn't forget you, so.
Well, for me, it's about defining a functional work-specific space. You know, maybe mimic your workspace at home as closely as you can, you know, including the use of technology, a desk or a dedicated workspace, and connecting. You know, stay connected with your team. Call instead of email. When you're on a conference call, conduct yourself the same way you would conduct yourself as if you were in person. Web conferences, you know, you may be relaxed and comfortable at home, but it's still a reflection, and people will define or it will impact their reputation of you if you're not as prepared to work at home as you were prepared to work at work. So, you know, don't get sloppy.
Yes. And what we're hearing from a lot of people, they even get dressed up for the work day. You know, I think the first reaction after COVID kicked in, people were a little bit more relaxed. And what I'm seeing is those practices, those disciplines, those habits that Leti talked about are really back in. And we often talk about the etiquette of teaching online and how students show up for their class. That is becoming sort of an issue, and less of a technology, but more of an etiquette of being online. Very interesting points. And I also want to ask a question that is sort of an elephant in the room, and I will be very interested to hear what you think. Dr. Tembley just shared in the chat that she's also teaching online, and the big conversation in the educational industry is definitely around the cost of American education, right? The cost of the college. So why should I be paying these enormous fees? And NYU is not cheap, as everyone knows. And take the classes at NYU and get those degrees for what it costs you. So what are the considerations here And do you think that economics are going to be an issue with so many alternatives becoming available outside of academia? So that's a really interesting question to reflect on. And I will give you a chance to volunteer to go first.
I can go.
Okay, Tom.
So the onus is going to go to NYU. It's going to go to the universities to create as engaging and as impactful and as valuable delivery of information. It can't be the same as online. It has to exceed it, because if the expectation is going to be the same, in order to meet that expectation, you need to exceed it a little bit. So where are those tools? Where is the technology? What can I get online that I couldn't possibly get on the campus experience?
Mm-hmm. Very good. Anyone else?
Sure.
Next.
I can add to what Tom said. I completely agree with Tom. Just adding the knowledge and the experience that we are getting from the experts in the field, it remains same. So I have been learning online for the whole HCAT program, but I have tremendous, like, the experience that they have shared and all the knowledge on each article that they have shared, especially now they are adding videos to these online training platforms where we are actually getting practical exposure as well. And we have a lot of guest speakers in our class who share how it's going in industries. So I see that practical exposure is still there in online class. You don't have to be in a room in a class to learn all of that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I would agree that another big point is the access to a network of practitioners, the access of a network of leaders that are already working in the field. A traditional online course will never give you that.
Very good. Michael, do you have a point of view?
Yeah, I think, Tom and Himani both alluded to it, but I think ultimately it comes down to the value of the content you're receiving. And I can truthfully say, I don't think I've received an ounce less content in our program from it being online than I would have in person. I think it's reality that there certainly are some things that are harder to communicate in an online format, really quantitative, really technical concepts that are a little bit more difficult to communicate in an online format. But I think our technology is evolving to the point where that, to the extent that it even still is an issue today, it won't be an issue in short order. And I think for the vast majority of concepts, it's just as easy to communicate online. And I would encourage those who are concerned to have an open mind.
Excellent. Paula.
So I definitely agree with what everyone shared. I would say the industry knowledge that I've gotten from my professors have been amazing. I know just from taking Stella's course, like I've met probably 2 or 3 people that are, global heads of their companies. And I think that whether I was online or in person, I still got that, value from the course. So I don't see a difference in it being online or in person.
That is a really good point. What we believe is going to happen, and is again this dynamic conversation happening in the higher ed circles, there's definitely going to be a consolidation and the flight, what we call the flight to brands. Tom, you mentioned that it will be the branded universities, the universities that are going to be focused on student experience, on the uniqueness of connections that students are going to be making through these programs, the exposure, the access. Those are actually going to be even increased because, to your point, now we can bring in industry leaders into the classroom from anywhere. If before we would have asked them to come to campus, which is almost an impossible proposition, now they just for half an hour in their life, they show up in your classroom and you get firsthand experience from them. So I totally agree. One more, and obviously we will have to be working really, really hard, and we will have to be working very closely with the industry to make sure that the education that we provide on the higher ed side is seamless and connects straight into what you're going to get in the workplace, on the market, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working for a big Fortune 50 company. So the last question I want to ask you is the question that kind of resonated throughout the whole conference with all the speakers, is one of inclusion. How do you feel that the diversity of the student body, the diversity of the faculty, and obviously inclusive education from that perspective, both from the content and the way it's being delivered, what kind of role does it play in the online environment? What are the specifics of being an inclusive classroom in the online environment that are different from anything else that you've been through in the traditional educational system? So it's a new question I'm asking, and I want to call on Himani. As you can see, this is a very diverse group. We're very diverse from different parts of the world, and happy to share. Himani?
Sure. So I think what really drives that is everyone has different habits. And like Leti mentioned before, really not just preparing for the class, but actually preparing your habits every day. That brings the diversity, how we kind of meeting in person, you learn about person just by meeting more frequently versus online. You get some FaceTime, you get to listen to only those people who are raising their views, and sometimes you don't listen to people who are not raising. But then when you start working on the projects together, you learn about them, you learn about the habits. So I believe that's going to drive how we are turning our habits also for students and professors both.
Tom, what about you? Thank you, Himani.
So earlier today, Fanny spoke of accessibility, and higher education becomes more accessible not only to students with disabilities, but students that are restricted by geography or income. How many brilliant potential students could attend a great university like NYU, but have to choose between attending NYU or caring for their family? How many just can't make it because of location? There's just there are so many elements of online that support a more diverse and inclusive classroom that I think is going to significantly improve classes of the future.
Excellent. Paula?
Yeah, so for me, I would say it's a very diverse program. I really enjoyed the in-person immersion. We really got a chance to know each other, a lot of great people from a lot of different backgrounds, with a lot of great experiences. I really enjoyed that part of it. Another part that I feel is really diverse is like the course selection and like all the different content. So I am not very technical, but I got to take a data visualization class. And as far as like the content, I feel like it was diverse in a way where you didn't have to have like, a computer science degree to take the course. It was very like you jumped straight head in, and as you went along, you had great instruction from the professor and you really got to grasp the concept. So I feel like it's a very diverse program in many different ways.
Thank you. Leti?
Well, I think it's also important to talk about the cognitive diversity. And I think that online gives a lot of space, for instance, to introverts that are able to communicate in the chat in written form when sometimes they are shy and they don't want to raise their voices. They can write down what they are thinking. And I think that that's just one of the many examples on how online learning can also be positive in terms of cognitive diversity.
Very interesting. Mike?
Yeah, I'll build on that. I had the same thought. So there was a question in the chat about engaging introverts, and I'm an introvert. And introverts have kind of a natural anxiety when all eyes are on them. So I think doing things like sending out information beforehand so they can start to process and think about any topics, any discussions we might have as a group. There are also just so many different ways to communicate digitally. So again, whether that's Slack, whether that's email side conversations, whether it's one-off chats that you have during the week. I think there are a lot of opportunities digitally to tailor to different personality types. And that goes for including all types of people, whether it's cognitively, behaviorally, or any other type of diversity.
Okay. And just a very final comment from each one of you. What opportunities do you think, what skills do you think you've gained through this type of education that will help you in the workplace? Again, being more online, focused on technology, focused on being remote and connecting, etc. How will that help you in the workplace when you graduate, you get your big jobs, and you go and join teams that are adjusting to this new way of working? Tom?
It certainly helps you to be, certainly helps you to be a better team member, being more understanding of not being able to stand next to somebody and encourage them. We're empathetic and we're supportive of each other from a distance. You know, two of our classmates were dealing with COVID. You know, one was from Abu Dhabi, and so her schedule, and she has two children. Her schedule and time, everything changed, and everybody that worked with her on a team made sure that we each made adjustments. Flexibility, understanding, empathy. There's so much that we've learned together as a class to be better for each other, which is going to make us better in our next role.
Excellent. Leti?
I would summarize it into words: online collaboration. I think that after this program, I am an expert in online collaboration because I know that almost everything can be done online.
Thank you. Himani?
Yeah. So I have great learning. So for me, it was learning about leadership skills and learning about networking skills, which is very important. I have personally changed in terms of networking. I've started posting more on LinkedIn, and that's something I've learned from my professors and my classmates. And another important thing that we should not forget is, of course, technology. So I learned how to make an AI chatbot within like 1 week, which is amazing. And I learned about Power BI data visualization tools, so I can be a better leader in presenting my story in less words. I used to use a lot of words in my presentation, and I've drastically improved in that. And I've also learned how to make use of time. And with being a working mother and taking class online, I've learned a lot on time management. So I'm so thankful for that.
Thank you. Paula?
Yeah, so for me, I'll definitely have to agree with Leti. Collaboration was big. Almost every single class that we had, it was a group or team effort. And I think that's something that you definitely take back with you to the workplace. Another thing, which is slipping my mind, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay. we will get back to you
Okay.
on that one. Okay, Michael?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, Leti mentioned earlier learning how to learn, and the five of us have spent the past year 4 days a week, 3 hours a night on video, digital and video formats, learning what our particular styles are and what our strengths and weaknesses are. And I think as we move forward into the workplace, going forward, that only will continue to help us understand what our strengths are and how we learn in these different video and digital formats. That candidly is how most learning is shifting to. I think we may have lost
Great. Paula, did you remember what you wanted to say?
Yes.
Paula?
The tools that I have taken away from this experience, the Power BI, the Tableau, SQL, all of those are all things that I can take back to my workplace. And I'm just very grateful that I've had that opportunity in this program.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Stella, we are ready for any questions that are still out there.
So I think a lot of them have been addressed through comments or answers. One that was interesting and kept coming up on several occasions is the fact that not all the occupations will be able to move to digital world. There will still be need for manufacturing, for plumbing, for trade skills. How do you think the learning will evolve of some of those that require in-person, or they will have to be executed in person? Will we see different types of technology used, or will we still have to go and have a touch learning experience?
I certainly have a point of view, and we can ask the students. I think even those types of skills will be accelerated in learning. And it's not just the plumbers and the carpenters, but also doctors. And it will have to do with augmented reality, VR, all different tools that will allow to practice, and most importantly, to Donna's point, get immediate feedback from any virtual practice that you would have. As an example, what I've heard from doctors, it takes for a long time for the doctors to practice, let's say the surgeons, right? Because they have to operate on cadavers, for example. That was how doctors have been trained for a few centuries. But now with the virtual tools available, they can actually practice much more frequently, get immediate feedback, and develop those skills in a faster way. I would suspect, and that's already in place, I would suspect that some of the trades we're talking about will also be accelerated in learning through practice, more frequent practice, and most importantly, that feedback, again, that Donna was talking about. Anyone else?
So when I was doing some work for Con Ed, Consolidated Edison in New York, for those of you that it's the energy company out here, they had a challenge of they needed to train up people on site in order to give them hands-on experience. So I developed an augmented reality that worked on a tablet that allowed them to do their measurements to ensure that the right power lines were going in. They were able to select the amount of power for the right type of load, overhead lines, look for issues that were on site. So they mapped out a single site. So rather than using materials over and over and over again, and depend on the assessment of an instructor who may have been having a bad day, could have had a headache, could have a number of different things. Now everything that was happening on the tablet was being captured so that they could give real-time feedback regarding what they missed, how much they missed, and not only that, but then direct them to the right information. They built a robotics maintenance program for BIC because they were having maintenance issues. The robots were breaking down too often. So their maintenance people were built a virtual reality robot from the manufacturer and then taking them through an accelerated maintenance program and help them to understand what parts of the machine are most likely to break if you missed this particular part of the maintenance. So having a bit of a construction background myself, I understand the labor perspective and how this technology can help to reduce costs, but also provide consistent feedback as well as provide analytics to managers and supervisors to ensure that it's safe as themselves and for their customers. I could talk about that all day, sorry.
No, that's a great example. And I think the technology is catching on, and the bandwidth and the processing capacity and the enablement of what traditionally was considered exclusively manual will take advantage of some of that as well. So I really appreciate all of your insights. This was an excellent conversation, and congratulations to all of you again for becoming the next generation of HR leaders and bringing that type of mindset to the workplace.